The Blender add-on PBR Painter 3 facilitates texturing models that do not have a clearly defined shape or form, such as things found in nature. Here I will paint a model of a beaver for a beaver pond on my Canadian Pacific Railway's mountain subdivision, Virtual Model Railroad, created with N3V Games Trainz, a computer railroad simulator. I have downloaded an image of a beaver from the internet. Meshes that do not have a defined shape or form can be challenging to model in Blender. They need to be created in sculpt mode, usually starting with a primitive such as a cube or a sphere, and using sculpt brushes to mold the primitive into the desired shape. This is a whole different workflow from creating geometric models in the 3D editing viewport, that is, models with predominantly straight lines. However, new software taking advantage of artificial intelligence, or AI for short, can make the modeling easier. There are several programs to choose from, this being only a small selection. I chose to have a look at Meshy, which in some reviews is reputed to be the best for comprehensive model generation. I chose it because it has a free tier, and this includes using an image to create the 3D model. With the free tier's 100 credits, one can make about 7 models a month. I also chose to have a look at Tripo AI, as it also has a free tier, which includes using an image to create the 3D model. With the free tier's 300 credits, one can make about the same number of models, that is, about 7 models a month. I did not try Sloyd AI, as the free tier does not include using an image to create the 3D model. I found that generating models from images, rather than entering a text description, gave better results, or at least closer to what I was looking for. I first tried Meshy, the program recently used by MSG Sapper. See the forum post, "I have seen the future, and it is AI generation of Trainz content." After opening the program and signing in, one can choose to convert text to 3D or to convert an image to 3D. After choosing image to 3D, an image is loaded by dragging it onto the interface. Then the model is generated by selecting Generate. 4 models are generated of increasing numbers of poly. Selecting one of the models gives one the option to view it in solid mode or textured mode. The model was impressive, but not perfect. In particular, the model had a wide fish-shaped tail, covered in fur instead of leathery scales. So for comparison, I tried converting the image to a model using Tripo Studio. The user interface and the workflow are similar to that of Meshy. After opening the program and signing in, one gets to choose either convert text to 3D or image to 3D. After choosing Image to 3D, an image is loaded by dragging it into the interface. A single model is generated when one selects Generate. I exported the model from Tripo Studio by selecting the export icon, then selecting the FBX format. I then imported the model into Blender by selecting the File menu, Import, and then FBX. The model was great, but not perfect. I want to get rid of the ridges on the sides of the model, as I want to texture the model with PBR Painter 3. I also want to get rid of the extra toes. To do this, I switched to sculpt mode and used the smooth brush. It turned out to be the only brush I needed to fix the model. Smoothing the model still left some pinching of the mesh. So in sculpt mode, I applied remesh. It took a bit of trial and error, but I eventually settled on an adaptivity of 0.0001 and a voxel size of 0.01. I then applied the decimate modifier to reduce the poly count. A ratio of 0.2 reduced the poly count from 26,134 to 5,266. The model was now ready to be textured with PBR Painter 3. From the image of a beaver downloaded from the internet, I used GIMP to create an albedo file, as previously described in my GIMP to Blender to Trainz video series. I added a face-on view of a beaver and the feet from images downloaded from the internet. I then used GIMP to create normal and roughness files. To create a UV map, I switched to the UV editing workspace, and in the UV editor window, selected the image menu, then New. I set the map to 2048 by 2048 pixels. I then unwrapped the model using Smart UV Project and set a margin of 0.016. The triple texturing no longer fits the model, so in the outliner window on the right, I switched to Blender File View and removed the material triple applied and the texture images. I then switched to the PBR Painter 3 workspace and removed the empty material slot. In the outliner window in the upper left-hand corner, I made sure that the mesh was selected. In the Properties window on the right, I selected New to create a new material and named it Beaver. With layers selected, I added a layer by selecting the layer icon. I named the layer Coat. For multi-channel painting, I selected multi-paint as the layer type and then selected OK. I like to switch from refresh material to auto refresh so that the workspace will automatically update as I work. Next, I selected the multi-import icon. With the multi-paint layer, one gets to choose the resolution one wants to use to paint the mesh. I chose 2K, 2048 by 2048 pixels. I then imported the textures, albedo, normal, and roughness. To increase the workspace, I closed the Sculpt Brush bar and dragged down the interface between the 3D Editor window and the Shader Editor window. I also closed the 3D Editor window's Properties panel. To move the stencil over my mesh, I dragged it with the right mouse button. To rotate the stencil, I held down the Command key and right mouse button dragged. To scale the stencil, I held down the Shift key and right mouse button dragged. To rotate and pan the mesh, I used custom keyboard shortcuts. The Option key and left mouse button and drag to rotate, and the Option key plus the Command key and drag to pan. To zoom, I used the mouse wheel or the hand icon. To paint on all three channels, albedo, normal, and roughness, I held down the Shift key and the Control key and left mouse button dragged the cursor. The albedo texture is painted on when the left mouse button is held down. The normal and roughness are added when the left mouse button is released. This can take a few seconds. One can close the Brush Asset and the Brush Settings panes in the Properties panel on the left to access the Brush Texture box. Clicking the Brush Texture box hides the stencil. One cannot retreat by selecting the X key, but one can erase the painting by selecting Erase Alpha and then select Paint to continue. One should save frequently while painting in case you need to go back and redo something. When reopening the Blender file, you will need to re-import the texture files. At any point during painting or upon completion, one can access and adjust the normal and roughness channels. For example, increase the normal to make the fur stand out.